Hello and welcome to Transformation Tuesday. How are you? If you're watching the replay, it's a pleasure to have you here. If you guys are on live, drop a comment in. I'd love to know how you are. Welcome back. Tonight we're here to chat, we're here to explore, we're here to go pretty deep into how to solve any problem. Hello Lauren, good to have you here. I'm here to drop in how to solve any problem. I want to give you a framework, which is a really simple way to obliterate any problem that you've got. How to take something that you're in resistance to, anything that you're suffering over, anything you're not taking action on, anything that's a problem, and how to smash through it using your mind, using very, very clever skills, questioning, and thinking processes. So it's a really simple process and I'm excited to share it with you. First of all, I want to share with you, why are we having this conversation? Well, most of the clients that come to me, they're experiencing some form of problem. Either they're not getting the results that they want in their life, they are not earning the income they desire, they are wanting to grow their business faster or create a greater degree of impact in the world, and for whatever reason they're not doing that. And so this is a simple process where you can uncover, where are we not taking action? Ultimately, if we are truly responsible, if we're truly empowered, if we're truly in alignment, the way to know that we're in the highest degree of alignment is we are making choices, i.e. taking action that is in alignment with our desires. So we know if we're not making choices that are in alignment with our desires, or we know if we're not moving forwards, well, we know that we're in resistance. We know that something is not quite going right. It's like we're wanting to put our foot down on the accelerator, but nothing's happening. The car's not accelerating. So, hey Monica, great to have you here. Hope you're doing well. G'day Ross, good to have you here. Guys, tonight we're unpacking how to solve any problem. So this is a powerful tool, and this is something that's really, really simple. And the great thing about personal development, and the great thing about the most powerful tools that you can use to empower yourself and transform your life, are usually the simplest. And they don't get any simpler than this. So I'm going to go through, there's 4 parts to this process, and it's really, really easy to follow. So follow along. As you're taking notes, I definitely recommend, hey Ross, good to see you, bud. Definitely recommend taking notes. Take notes on what are the action steps. What are you actually going to apply from this? Because I'm a big advocate. It's not just my name for the sake of it, Chris Action Jackson. Action is the name of the game. If you're not taking action, it means that, well, we're just indulging in intellectual entertainment. So action is always the highest measurement of how in alignment you are. You could have the best ideas, you could have the best philosophies, you might be feeling really, really amazing, but if there's no action taking place, well, there's not really a sense of alignment. There's not really a sense of creation taking place. There's stagnation. So action is always the highest measurement of movement, of progress. Number 1, we've got to recognize whenever we have a problem that we are the cause of that problem. That's the starting point. We have to take full 100% responsibility for, I have created the problem. How? Well, I've created the problem in my mind. Because if I'm not here viewing this situation through my eyes right now and having this thought, then there is no problem. So we have to take responsibility for the problem has been created by us observing and having a thought and experiencing a reality in that moment. So this is the first thing, is to recognize that we have free will. We are doing our consciousness. We are inside our own mind. And so no one else can enter our mind but us. No one can think our thoughts but us. No one can react to our thoughts but us. No one can feel our emotions but us. We are 100% responsible for everything that we experience. And as soon as we come to the realization that that's the truth of us as a human being, we're in this vessel as a human, we are the ones that are doing our mind, our thinking, our consciousness. No one else is doing it. So we can take responsibility for, okay, I've created it. Now that's the first step. As long as, if we can get to that first step and take 100% responsibility that we have created the problem, we can change it. It's totally within our power to change it. As soon as we say that something is outside of our control, i.e. our experience is outside of our control, I'm not talking about things like, for example, right now there's things going on the other side of the world politically. We don't have any control over what's going on the other side of the world right now in someone else's political system, or if there's wars going on right now, you could say that to a degree we don't have control over that. What we do have control over is our mind, how we perceive that. So this is the distinction. Our experience. We have 100% control over our experience that we are creating. Because you could look at something and you don't have to generate suffering. For example, you could look at if World War III kicks off, you could look at that and you could choose to suffer. You could choose to feel scared. You could choose to feel fear. Or you could choose to feel optimism. You could choose to feel resilient. You could choose to feel a sense of lightness. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy. The whole conversation about tonight is I'm not saying that any of this is necessarily easy. It is kind of simple though. And that's why being a human being is one of the most challenging games that's ever existed in the history of reality. So if you're thinking this whole process is supposed to be easy, well, delete that, because it doesn't necessarily supposed to be easy. What we're talking about here is it's a simple process, and I want to encourage you to just follow along and play the game. And what you'll find is when we come out through the other side of this game, you'll find that there's some pretty powerful tools here that are available to you. So suffering is fundamentally where we place the cause of our experience outside of ourselves. I'll say that again. Any suffering or resistance we experience is simply because we place the cause of our experience outside of ourselves. So what we're doing is, if we're having a moment of sadness or anger or resistance or procrastination, what we're doing is we're saying there's something out there that's doing something to me. It's a that did it to me. It's an outside in strategy. Hey Dave, good to have you here, buddy. So that's the first element to realize. This is still part of pillar 1, which is taking responsibility for we are the cause of our experience. Once we've accepted that we are creating our experience, this now gives us power. This gives us empowerment. We can take the power back because we can say, I'm creating my reality. I accept that. Now we can get down to the nitty-gritty of understanding how that's taking place. Because I'm running an internal strategy inside my mind where I'm reacting, I'm getting frustrated, I'm judging, I'm in resistance somehow. And in order to be in resistance, this concept of resistance and this is the second pillar, the concept of resistance is a suffering process. Hey Barbara, good to have you here. This resistance is a suffering process. This resistance is generated by us being resistant to something. We can only experience suffering. We can only experience resistance if we are resistant to something. There's a reaction going on. Well, what are we resistant to? That's the key question here. So pillar number 2 is we've got to get very, very clear on what is the resistance. So the questions that you want to ask here, and there's a series of questions, so you might want to write these down because these are powerful, is what am I in resistance to? What am I judging? What am I judging? What aspect of my reality am I judging? I'm playing the victim here. How am I playing the victim? How am I choosing to create my reality here? How am I choosing to be the victim? How am I choosing to suffer? What we're doing here is recovering that resistance is actually a choice. But in order to know that resistance is a choice, we have to first understand it. We have to understand resistance. So we need to understand what it is. So resistance is generally going to be something that prevents us from taking action. I'm going to define resistance really simply. Resistance is something that prevents us from taking action. Let me know if you can agree. If we're not taking action, like we know where we want to go, we know what we want, and we're not taking action, then there must be some resistance. There's something blocking us from making that choice, from moving. And think about it. It's really quite logical. If you're in resistance, it means you're not going to be moving forward. Or you might be moving forward, but not as fast or not as powerfully as you could be otherwise. So we're going to ask the question, okay, how am I in resistance? We need to get to a level of understanding, well, what is resistance? Once we understand resistance, so that's part 2, right, which is simply just some sort of negative emotion, some sort of fear, something that's preventing us from taking action. Once we start to recognize there is resistance present, we can ask the question number 3, which is, what choice am I making? Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. Hey, Daddy, good to have you here, brother. We got to ask this third pillar. This third pillar kicks in, which is, what choice am I making? Now, this choice is ultimately determining how we're in resistance. Now, I want to give you some examples. Let's just say, for example, you're in resistance to your partner. Your partner's done something or hasn't done something, right? And you might be feeling angry towards them. So your resistance is towards them. So the resistance is resentment. You might have been judging something about their behavior. So now, what choice are you making? Now, in order to come to this awareness, you've got to ask the question, what choice am I making? How am I choosing to create my reality? How am I choosing to create my experience? Well, the choice in that moment is to make their action mean maybe they don't love you, maybe they don't care about you, maybe I made the wrong decision, I shouldn't be with them, they don't like me, they're rude. Right? So we're going to be aware of, well, what's the choice that we're making in that moment? And that could be a meaning. We could be making a choice to make ourselves feel like a victim. We're going to ask the question, how am I choosing to create my experience right now? How am I choosing to create my experience? That's the powerful question. That's one of the most powerful questions that will liberate you from suffering. If there's one question, if you forget everything else in this video and only remember one question, it's exactly that. How am I choosing to create my experience? That will take you out of victimhood. That one question will take you out of victimhood completely, because what it does is it recovers the choice that you're making in the moment to suffer. You're making a choice in the moment to play small. You're making a choice to not act out of love. You're making a choice to be self-righteous. You're making a choice to not be compassionate. You're making a choice to not forgive. You're making a choice to stay in resistance. You're making a choice. So own the choice. It's a beautiful realization. It's a surrendering to knowing that, I've made a choice here. There's a choice point that has taken place. Now, most of this is outside of awareness. It's an unconscious process that happens for most people, and they end up in the suffer cycle. We call this the suffer cycle. They end up in the suffer cycle, and they don't even know how they got there. 5 hours later, they're still wallowing in negative emotion, and they don't realize that there was a thought or a choice all the way that happened 5 hours ago that they made that now created a story that they've now bought into. And it's like they've sat down in the movie theater and they're now watching a film, and a couple hours later they've forgotten it's actually a film. It feels like it's so real that they actually bought into it and they forgot they were sitting in a cinema. So this is the thing, is we've got to be very, very aware of our choices. How am I choosing to create my experience? So that's one of the most powerful questions you can ever ask whenever you're in resistance, is how are you creating the resistance? How are you not taking responsibility for creating your reality? How are you not taking responsibility for your emotional state? How are you not taking responsibility for the thoughts that are occupying your consciousness right now? Because you are in charge of your consciousness. How are you choosing to do your consciousness right now? How are you choosing to not rise above? How are you choosing to not take responsibility for your experience and change the channel? Instead of tuning into Victimhood FM or Suffering FM, or I'm going to let my thoughts and emotions happen randomly to me FM, to I'm going to choose to consciously respond to my thinking, change my thinking, be aware of my thinking, and modify, be at cause, modify my conscious response to this, and actually take responsibility for my creation. We are creating this experience. We are all our own creators. We are creating our experience. We're creating our thoughts. We're creating our emotions. We're creating our behavior. We're creating the whole lot. And we're going to take full ownership of that in each and every moment. In each moment. As soon as you forget to be present to yourself, well, it's so easy to get caught up in the suffer cycle. Thanks, Daddy. You're awesome too, brother. It's so easy to get caught up in the suffer cycle when you're not present to yourself. Because it's like, as I said, it's like we're now watching life like we're watching a movie. And after you've been sitting in the movie cinema for so long, you forget that it's a film. It becomes your reality. It becomes so real. Now, remember from last week, I spoke about we are not our thoughts. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts are just simply information passing through our consciousness. Your thoughts are just information. It's energy. It's just a form of energy. And as soon as you buy into that thought, it's like you're now putting a set of sunglasses on, and it's now tinting your reality with the energy and the perspective and the frequency of that thought. So you have now become the thought. Whenever we associate into a thought, i.e. indulge in a thought and follow it and buy into it, we become the thought. It's like we're now putting on a set pair of sunglasses and we're now viewing the world through a particular tint, a particular lens, a particular perspective. Well, that perspective is not ours. It's temporarily ours when we decide to own that thought and become the thought. But we can choose to dissociate with that thought and put that thought back out there and just let it go. So that becomes a choice. It only becomes a choice if you're aware that it's a choice. For most people, they're not aware that their thoughts and how they respond to their thoughts are choices. They totally are. We have 70,000 thoughts every single day. Now, if you are fully conscious of your experience, you can choose every single one of your thoughts. You can go, I would like to think this now. Then I would like to think this now. Now, if you're fully conscious, now, I'm not saying this is easy, but this is enlightenment. This is mastery of the self. This is mastery of the mind, is when you can start to become aware of all the information that's passing through your consciousness. You become empowered because you now see that this is an inside job. Our consciousness is an inside job. Thanks, Dave. I like your comment there. I'm just going to see if I can read your comment there, mate. Loving this concept realization that thoughts are just part of the ether that we choose to embrace or ignore. You're spot on, Dave. Thoughts are just information. They're just like bubbles of energy. They're just packets of information floating through our consciousness. And it is our identification with the thought that creates our sense of identity. What we do is we now take on a thought, and it's like it's a bubble of information floating along, and now we put it on. We put on that thought. Now we become the thought. Well, if it's a great thought, well, it's fantastic. We're now viewing our reality through some pretty amazing goggles. Like, for example, and I'll give the example of if we have the thought that I am good enough or I am worthy. Well, if we're wearing that thought as a pair of goggles, hey Maria, good to have you here. If we're wearing that thought of I am worthy or I am good enough as a pair of goggles, then that's become your reality. You're going to be feeling pretty good. You're now going to see opportunities. You're going to now see your reality in a particular way. Now, is that necessarily the way that reality is? Well, it's not necessarily the way that reality is. It's the way that we've chosen reality to be because of the thought that we're experiencing, right? So this is what we're talking about here is subjective reality. We're talking about we are creating our reality by the thoughts that we are choosing to become. We are identifying with thought. And as a result of that, we forget that that is a choice because we get stuck in the thought. And all of a sudden, an hour or 2 hours or 10 hours has gone by and we've indulged in a thought of, go back to that example before of if your partner was, if you're angry with your partner. Well, you've just had the thought that my partner is mean or rude. And now what happens is there's a thought storm that follows that. There's about 20 other thoughts or 50 other thoughts or 5 hours worth of thinking that's now following this story. And then all these other thoughts are getting generated, that they're no good, that they're rude, that they don't deserve you, that you should leave them, that they're rubbish. So this is all just an internal game. This is a movie that we're writing and directing and creating in each and every millisecond. But if we've sat down on the couch and we're just watching this film unfold like it's outside of us, well, we're going to experience suffering. So this whole stage 3 is all about recovering the choice point, that what we're experiencing is actually our choice. What we're experiencing is our choice. Now, if we're not aware that it was our choice, well, it might seem outside of conscious awareness. It might not appear that way. Yeah, thank you, Maria. So tell me if you guys can relate. Sometimes when you get stuck in your thoughts, who here's ever got stuck in your thoughts, and all of a sudden 2 hours or 5 hours has gone by and you're worrying about something and you've created this big monstrous story about what took place when it actually was just, it started with a thought. You just bought into a thought and you created your own story. So this is a powerful understanding when you arrive at that. I've got a question from you, Ross. How do you stop the thought before you react? It's like your screaming child crying and not let yourself think it's annoying or frustrating. That's a good question. Well, you can observe the thought, and the way that you do this is there's strength training. Right? Meditation is a form of strength training. So the practice of meditation is one of these tools that you can use to not react to your thoughts. Suffering is simply reacting to our thoughts. So if we are reacting to our thought, then there's a couple of things here. You can either prevent the thought and just change the thought, or you can be comfortable with the thought. You can accept the thought. Now that's a whole other process that I teach in some of my more advanced trainings. But fundamentally, what we're talking about here is strength training through conscious awareness that we are not our thoughts. And all that it takes is a moment of presence. This is the skill, presence, present state awareness. If you can bring yourself back into the present moment, then what happens is you can override that suffering because you realize that you're reacting to the thought, and then you can do some work on that thought in that moment. You can embrace a sense of compassion, You can embrace a sense of love. You can rise above the default programming and the habits of the mind that we've been conditioning into feeling and thinking. And we can interrupt ourselves in that moment and laugh at ourselves and go, I was doing one of those thoughts. I'm making a choice to make this mean that. I'm making a choice to get angry. I'm choosing to be in resistance. I'm choosing to judge this. Judgment is a key characteristic here. So there's a lot of elements here that are taking place. There's a tapestry of choices that are going on. Now, if we don't have awareness of those choices, then we're in reaction mode. We are in unconscious autopilot, default mode. And so all that's taking place here is if we are reacting, if we're in resistance, it just means that we don't understand what we're doing. It just means we don't understand. We don't have a degree of conscious awareness of the strategy that we're running. And as such, we're experiencing resistance. We're experiencing suffering. Right? And that shows up as anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, resistance. So as soon as we recover the choice point that I am choosing to be in resistance because I'm choosing to judge, I'm choosing to be self-righteous, I'm choosing to not be compassionate, I'm choosing to not, basically it comes down to I'm choosing to not be love. That's fundamentally what it comes down to. Right now in this moment, I'm choosing to be the opposite of love. I'm going to be a victim. I'm going to just be someone who's just so annoyed or so short-tempered. I'm going to be the opposite of love. Now, if you want to be the opposite of love, well, you're probably going to stay in resistance. So that's the key choice point from number 3, is what choice are you making? Now, when you can understand the choice that you're making, you gain the power to then let go of what was. Because the only reason why we hold on to something is because we don't understand it. And you might, tell me if you resonate. There's plenty of times in life where we just think, why am I holding on to that? Let me know if you've experienced something where you're just holding on to something. It might be blame or resentment or anger or something from the past. If we're holding on to something, the only reason why we're holding on to it is because we don't have a degree of understanding of it such that we automatically let it go. The human mind in our consciousness is, its natural process is to let things go, but it can only let them go once we've got the learning, once we have the understanding, once we have extracted the wisdom from that experience to then let it go. So if you're in resistance, if you're suffering, the only reason why you haven't let it go is because you haven't yet understood the concept or the experience enough to be able to then let yourself make the choice to let it go. So this is a key distinction, because a lot of people feel frustrated because they're like, oh, why can't I let this go? Why am I still holding on to this? Well, the reason is because the level of understanding is limited. There needs to be a deeper awareness and a deeper understanding in order to unlock this automatic program that the human being naturally does, which is once we get to a particular level of understanding, we naturally let things go. We will naturally forgive. We will naturally be compassionate once we have that understanding. So it becomes about understanding the self, understanding the programs, understanding the strategies and the habits that we've been running for so long that we get caught up in this thought storm, in this story, and we forget that we've been generating all this thinking and all this suffering for such a long time that it just becomes default. So we've got to learn to completely take ownership of that experience that we're generating in the moment and see, well, if I'm not letting it go, what do I need to understand about this such that I can let it go? Now we move on to step 4. Step 4 is now we need to make a new choice. We need to take responsibility for the choices that we've been making. We need to, thanks Maria, thanks Daddy. We need to take responsibility for making new choices. In life, if we want different results, we've got to make new choices. You can wait for other people around you to change, right? But that's it's placing a large degree of hope, waiting and wishing. It's ultimately outsourcing your reality to someone else to wait for someone else to change. If you want your reality to change, you've got to make a different choice. That's the highest, most empowering access point you have to creating your reality the way you want it to be, is making a new choice. So you've got to ask yourself, well, if you were creating your reality in that way, what new choice would you have to make in order to let it go? What's the new choice? What's the new action point? What's the decision? What's your new way of being? Maybe it's forgiveness. Maybe it's compassion. Maybe it's love, right? Some great questions to ask yourself is, what choice would love make? If I was the full expression of love, what choice would I make? If I was the most empowered, limitless version of me, what choice would I make right now? if I was the greatest, best, most authentic version of me right now in this moment, if I was the highest version of me, what choice would I make? These are some great questions to ask yourself. And if you're in a low mood, if your emotion is in a low mood, if you're in a low frequency and vibration, well, the quality of the answer that you're going to come up with is not going to be that good. So you've also got to recognize you've got to take responsibility for your emotional state, for your feeling, and not ask yourself these questions when you're in a low mood. If you're in a low mood, it's kind of like the equivalent of being hungover and expecting to go to work and work fully productive when you're hungover. Well, the same thing is happening in life. If we're in a low mood and we're having conversations or asking questions or facing our reality in a low mood, well, it can be this vicious cycle where the quality of the answers that we get are just so low because the quality of the questions that we're asking is so low. So if you're wanting to take yourself from a low vibration to a high vibration, which is another way of just saying from a low mood to a higher mood, then some of the questions that you can ask yourself are, okay, what would love do? How do I get myself into a state of compassion, of forgiveness, of empathy, of just lightness? How do I laugh at this situation? You've got to do some work to get yourself to a point to elevate your mood to such a point you now get access to a higher range of insight and wisdom. Because if you're operating in a low mood, well, you might ask that question, what would love do? And you'll go, love would slap that mofo, right? Whereas if you're in a high mood, when you ask the question, what would love do? You'll go, wow, I'd actually be forgiving and compassionate right now. I'd actually be the bigger person. I would actually have a conversation. I would actually be proactive. I would do this. I would do that. So this is really where we're regaining the power. We are becoming more conscious of us creating our reality, and we're doing everything within our power to elevate our level of consciousness so that we're asking the most empowering questions. We're in the highest mood. We are being the highest frequency and vibration. We're being the greatest version of ourselves, and we are having the courage to step up into the best version of us. This is what it also comes down to. I'm not saying that a lot of this is easy. This isn't supposed to be easy, right? If you're wanting this all to just be super easy, right, then give up. This whole journey, there's a big misconception. People thinking, oh, it's so hard. It's like, well, yeah, sometimes life's hard. Sometimes it's challenging to take responsibility for making these choices. Sometimes it requires work. Sometimes you need to hire a coach. You need to reach out to people. You need support. You've got to do personal development. You've got to attend videos and listen to workshops and come to online training courses. The whole point here is there's a whole deep field of personal mastery that exists in order to take this just from an idea to a practical embodiment of all of this. So this is where, yes, all of everything that I'm sharing with you, it's kind of simple in concept. The challenge is when you integrate it. The challenge is when you become consistent in your approach. The challenge is when you become more consciously aware in the moment of applying these principles and reminding ourselves not to buy into the illusion of this. There's so many illusions in life. But we just, as I said before, we will buy into a thought and we'll follow that thought, we'll latch onto it, and it might be the thought of my partner's no good. And then what will now happen is the thought storm gets generated, and 5 hours later we come out the other side and it's like a hurricane of just negative thinking. Well, we've got to check ourselves. We've got to focus on these skills of conscious awareness. We've got to do the work. We've got to focus on self. We've got to reflect. We've got to take responsibility. This needs to become the number one priority in our life, is us taking responsibility for our creation, our creatorship, our consciousness. We are creating this. Hey Maria, glad to know. So I'm going to wrap it up there, guys, but I'm still going to do a bit of a mini recap. Category number one was, first of all, we have to take responsibility for being the cause of the challenge, the problem. We have created it. We are inside our mind. We are conscious, sovereign beings. No one can think our thoughts but us. Therefore, we must take responsibility for everything that takes place inside the space that is our consciousness. We need to recognize that suffering is simply the illusion that gets generated from thinking that something is happening outside of us that's controlling our thinking, something that's happening outside of our control, right? That's the part connected to part one. Two is we need to recognize what's the resistance. What are we resistant to? What are we judging? What are we in fear of? What are we creating resistance around? 3 is what are the choices we're making? How are we choosing to be in resistance? And we need to get ourselves to a level of understanding the problem so we can let it go. And then number 4 is we need to make a new choice. We need to recognize what is the choice that I need to rise to the occasion to make in order to let go of my suffering. Maybe it's clearing the thought. Maybe it's forgiveness. Maybe it's being compassionate. Maybe it's going for a run. Maybe it's meditating. Maybe it's just sitting down and having a nap. Maybe it's going and doing a personal development course. Maybe it's time to come and have a chat to Chris about having some coaching. Whatever that choice is for you, you've got to own the choice, and you've got to recognize that every aspect of your life is being generated by you making choices. Now, you could either make choices that are in alignment, that you're consciously aware of, or you can make choices that are out of alignment that are not in your conscious awareness. Now, if you make choices that are out of alignment, that are unconscious, well, who knows where you could end up? Who knows? So the whole point here is to start become more conscious of the choices that we're making. And you can only become conscious of the choices that you're making if you reflect on your choices. Because we have 70,000 thoughts per day, but we have 35,000 choices per day. That's a lot of choices. And most of them are happening outside of conscious awareness. So we have to reflect, we have to review, we have to performance analyze ourselves. We've got to say how many of those choices were in alignment with my highest expression. 35,000. I wasn't even aware of one of them today. Gee, I got to lift my game. I got to lift my awareness. I've got to reflect. I've got to self-reflect. I need to hold myself accountable. I've got to surround myself with like-minded people. I've got to put myself in a community of people that are going to support me in growing and nourishing and nurturing this awareness. So this has got to be a skill for life. This isn't just something that you turn up once a week and just kind of watch a video like this. This has got to be something that you infuse in every aspect of your life. And it doesn't have to be complex. It could be phone reminders. It could be post-it notes. It's calendar reminders. It's going to meetup groups. It's surrounding yourself with like-minded people that are sharing this message, that are going to help you infuse this into a daily practice. So I trust that helps. I trust this has been insightful, and I trust you've got some good awarenesses and you've got some good questions there to follow through on. So I'm going to finish it up there. Thank you for joining. Good to see you there, Jenny. As always, guys, lots of love. Please, if you have any questions, if you have any specific topics that you would like extra support on, please drop me an email at info@chrisjacksoncoaching.com. For those that are on Instagram, please follow me at Chris Jackson Coaching. You'll get some pretty good nuggets there as well. Obviously, here's my Facebook group. Also, for those that want access to my VIP newsletter, please go to chrisjacksoncoaching.com and you can sign up there to get all of my nuggets of wisdom that I send out to my VIP mailing list every week. So I will leave it there. Wishing you a magical week, and as always, lots of love. Bye for now. Thanks, guys.